She wouldn't let me leave without calling, check my social media, read my messages. I was under a microscope. But one day I found a photo. In it, a boy, and the caption, "To my first son." Growing up, I thought every family worked like mine. Mom needed to know where I was every second of every day. If I walked to the corner store, she'd time how long it took and call if I was 5 minutes late. My phone had to stay on 24/7, and she'd randomly call just to hear background noise and make sure I was where I said I'd be. At school, she'd show up unannounced during lunch breaks, claiming she was just dropping off something I forgot. Teachers knew her by name because she'd email them weekly asking about my behavior, my grades, who I sat with at lunch. Other kids started avoiding me because having a friend meant their parents might get interrogated too. My bedroom door couldn't be closed. Ever. She said closed doors meant secrets, and secrets meant trouble. She'd go through my backpack every night, not looking for drugs or weapons, but for notes passed in class or phone numbers written on scraps of paper. She memorized my handwriting so well she could spot when I'd written something and erased it. When I turned 16 and wanted to get my license, she made me take practice tests for months beyond what was required. Not because she cared about my safety on the road, but because a car meant freedom, and freedom terrified her. Even after I got my license, she'd only let me drive to school and back, the same route every day. She timed that trip too. Dating was completely off limits. She said girls my age were distractions and would ruin my future. When a girl from my chemistry class asked me to prom, Mom called her parents and told them I wasn't allowed to date until college. The humiliation burned for weeks. I stopped talking to classmates altogether because every friendship felt like it came with the risk of Mom's interference. College was supposed to be my escape, but she chose the school, a small place 30 minutes from home, so I could commute. She picked my classes, my schedule, even my major. Business administration, she said, was practical and stable. When I mentioned maybe studying something else, she'd remind me how much money she was spending on my education and how ungrateful I sounded. She'd pack my lunch every day, the same sandwich and apple, in a brown bag with my name written in her handwriting. Other college students would stare as I unpacked my elementary school lunch while they grabbed pizza or burgers. But asking to buy my own food meant explaining why I needed money, and explanations led to more questions, more control. My phone was still monitored. She'd installed some app that let her see every text, every call, every website I visited. She knew my passwords for everything: email, social media, even my online banking account that had maybe $50 in it. Privacy wasn't a concept that existed in our house. The few times I tried to push back, she'd get this look in her eyes like I was betraying her personally. She'd remind me of all the dangers in the world, all the bad things that happened to kids whose parents didn't care enough to protect them. She'd list news stories about college students who got into trouble, who overdosed, who disappeared. Her voice would get shaky, and she'd say she couldn't live with herself if something happened to me. By the time I turned 20, I felt like I was suffocating. I had no real friends, no relationships, no independence. I was an adult who needed permission to buy a different brand of toothpaste. My days were mapped out in 15-minute increments, and deviation from the schedule meant hours of questioning about where I'd been and why. That's when I started spending time in our basement. It was the one place in the house where she didn't follow me immediately. She'd call down every 20 minutes to check what I was doing, but I had brief moments of solitude. The basement was full of old furniture, boxes of holiday decorations, and photo albums from before I was born. I'd never been particularly curious about Mom's life before me. She rarely talked about her childhood or her teenage years. There were no pictures of old boyfriends or high school friends displayed anywhere in the house. It was like her life began the day I was born. One afternoon, while pretending to organize some old Christmas lights, I pulled out a photo album I'd never seen before. The cover was faded pink leather, the kind that was popular in the late 90s. Inside were pictures of Mom, but she looked completely different. Younger, obviously, but also happier. She was smiling in ways I'd never seen, laughing with friends, posing at what looked like graduation parties. Then I saw the photo that changed everything. It was Mom, maybe 18 or 19 years old, standing next to a little boy who looked about 5. He had dark hair like mine, the same nose, the same stubborn cowlick that stuck up no matter how much gel I used. At the bottom of the page, in Mom's handwriting, it said, "Bobby, 1998. I stared at that photo for probably 10 minutes. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I was born in 2003. This kid was older than me. This kid looked like me. And Mom had never, not once, mentioned having another child. I flipped through more pages. There were several pictures of this boy, Bobby, always with Mom. Playing in a park, opening Christmas presents, blowing out candles on a birthday cake. He looked happy. Mom looked happy. They looked like a real family. The photos stopped abruptly. The last one was dated 1999, and after that, the rest of the album was empty. My hands were shaking as I closed the album. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, my mom's obsessive protection, suddenly felt like a lie. I sat in that basement for hours, trying to make sense of what I'd found. When I finally went upstairs, Mom was in the kitchen making dinner, the same meal she made every Tuesday. She looked at me and immediately knew something was wrong. "What's the matter? You look upset. Did something happen at school? Did someone say something to you?" I couldn't answer right away. I just stood there, watching her move around the kitchen, this woman who I thought I knew completely. Finally, I managed to speak. "Who is Bobby?" The wooden spoon she was holding clattered to the floor. Her face went completely white, and for a moment I thought she might faint. She gripped the counter with both hands and stared at me like I'd just told her the house was on fire. "Where did you hear that name?" Her voice was barely a whisper, and there was something in it I'd never heard before. Fear, maybe, or panic. "I found photos. In the basement. Pictures of you with a little boy named Bobby." She closed her eyes and took several deep breaths. When she opened them again, she looked older somehow, like those few seconds had aged her years. "You shouldn't have been going through those things. Those are private." But I couldn't stop now. 20 years of being controlled, of never getting answers to questions, of being treated like I couldn't handle the truth about anything, came boiling up. "Who is he, Mom? Why are there pictures of you with another kid? Why did you never tell me I had a brother?" She turned away from me and gripped the counter even tighter. Her shoulders were shaking. "He's not your brother. Not anymore." The words hung in the air between us. I waited for her to explain, but she just stood there, staring out the kitchen window at nothing. "What do you mean, not anymore? What happened to him?" She turned around slowly, and I could see tears in her eyes. In all my 20 years, I'd maybe seen her cry twice, and never like this. I was 18 when I had him. Just 18. His father left the minute I told him I was pregnant. Just disappeared like he'd never existed. My parents, they were so angry, so disappointed. They said I'd ruined my life, ruined their reputation in the community. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, suddenly looking fragile in a way I'd never seen. They wouldn't help me unless I did what they wanted. They said I was too young, too stupid to raise a child. They said if I really loved him, I'd give him to a family who could provide for him properly. My stomach dropped. I sat down across from her, not trusting my legs to keep holding me up. "You gave him away?" She nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. "The adoption agency said it would be better for everyone if it was a clean break. No contact, no updates, no looking back. They said it would be less confusing for him, easier for me to move on. I was supposed to pretend it never happened. I felt like I was going to be sick. All those years of her controlling every aspect of my life, and she'd had another son that she just gave away. But you kept pictures of him. I couldn't throw them away. He was my baby, even if I couldn't keep him. For 5 years, he was my whole world. We lived in a tiny apartment, just the two of us. I worked 3 jobs to pay rent and buy diapers. It was hard, but we were happy." She looked up at me, and her eyes were desperate, pleading. "You have to understand, I didn't want to give him up. My parents cut off all support. They said if I wanted to keep him, I was on my own completely. No money, no help, no place to live. I was struggling so much. Some days we didn't have enough food. Some nights I couldn't afford to keep the heat on. So you just gave him away?" I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. The family that adopted him was wonderful. They had money, a big house. They could give him everything I couldn't. Music lessons, good schools, college funds. I told myself I was doing the right thing. She reached across the table like she wanted to touch my hand, but I pulled away. After the adoption was finalized, I moved away, started over. I got a job, saved money, went to school at night. I promised myself that if I ever had another child, I would never let anything bad happen. I would never lose another son. And suddenly everything made sense. The constant monitoring, the refusal to let me have any independence, the fear in her eyes whenever I was out of her sight for more than a few minutes. She wasn't protecting me from the world. She was protecting herself from losing me the way she'd lost Bobby. But knowing the reason didn't make it hurt less. If anything, it made it worse. "So you turned me into a prisoner because you felt guilty about your first son?" "It wasn't guilt," she said quickly. "It was love. I love you so much that the thought of anything happening to you makes me physically sick. Every time you leave this house, I'm terrified you won't come back. But that's not love, Mom. That's... I don't know what that is, but it's not love. She looked like I'd slapped her. How can you say that? Everything I do is to keep you safe. Every rule, every question, every check-in. I've dedicated my entire life to making sure you're okay. No, you've dedicated your entire life to making sure you don't have to feel guilty about Bobby again. The silence that followed was deafening. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face, and I stared back, feeling a mixture of anger and pity and sadness that I couldn't untangle. Update 1. The weeks after finding out about Bobby were the hardest of my life. Mom and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was stilted and awkward. She still tried to maintain her usual level of control, asking where I was going, when I'd be back, who I'd be with. But now there was a desperate edge to it that made me feel sick. I couldn't stop thinking about my brother. Half-brother, technically, but that didn't matter. Somewhere out there was a person who shared my DNA, who lived with the same mother I had, who probably wondered about his birth family the same way I was now wondering about him. I started researching adoption records, trying to figure out if there was any way to find him. Most of the websites said that closed adoptions from the late 90s were nearly impossible to reverse without consent from both parties. But I had to try something. Late at night, when Mom thought I was sleeping, I'd sneak down to the basement and go through every box, every photo album, every piece of paper that might have information about Bobby. I found his birth certificate tucked inside an old cookbook. Robert James, born March 15, 1993. The father's name was listed as unknown. I also found letters. Dozens of them, written in Mom's handwriting but never sent. They were addressed to Bobby, telling him about her life, asking if he was happy, wondering if he looked like her or like his father. Some were dated just a few years ago. She'd been writing to him my entire life, pouring out her heart to a son she'd never see again. Reading those letters broke something inside me. I realized that Mom's obsession with controlling me wasn't just about her fear of losing me. It was about her guilt over Bobby, but it was also about her grief. She'd been mourning her first son for over 2 decades, and I'd been her replacement, her second chance, her opportunity to prove she could be a good mother. But that's not fair to put on a person. I couldn't be Bobby's replacement. I couldn't fix what she'd lost. I decided to find him myself. It took me 3 months of searching online databases, genealogy websites, and social media before I found anything useful. I'd been searching for Robert James and Bobby combined with Mom's name, the adoption agency's name, anything I could think of. Finally, I found a profile on a reunion website for people looking for birth families. The post was dated just 6 months earlier, looking for birth mother. Born March 15, 1993, adopted through Sacred Heart Family Services. Birth name possibly Robert James. Any information appreciated. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I created an account and sent him a message, trying to explain who I was without sounding completely crazy. I told him I'd found photos and documents, that I thought we might be half-brothers, that our mother had never told me about him. He replied within hours. His name was Robert, but everyone called him Rob. He lived about 2 hours away, worked in construction, was married with a 2-year-old daughter. His adoptive parents had been amazing, he said, but he'd always wondered about his birth family. He tried searching before, but never had much information to go on. We agreed to meet the following Saturday at a diner halfway between our towns. I told Mom I was going to study at the library, which technically wasn't a complete lie since I'd brought textbooks with me as props. The drive to meet Rob was surreal. I kept imagining what he'd look like, what we'd talk about, whether we'd have anything in common besides genetics. Part of me worried this was all a mistake, that I'd built up some fantasy about having a brother that would crumble the moment we met in person. But when I walked into that diner and saw him sitting in a corner booth, I knew immediately it was him. He looked like me, but older, more confident. Same dark hair, same stubborn cowlick, same nose that was just slightly too big for his face. He was wearing work clothes and had calloused hands, everything about him practical and straightforward. We talked for 4 hours. He told me about his adoptive family. His dad was a teacher. His mom worked for the county government. They'd been honest about his adoption from the beginning, never made him feel like a secret or a burden. They'd encouraged him to look for his birth family when he was ready. He'd had a good childhood. Little league baseball, family vacations, help with homework, college tuition paid without question. Everything Mom said the adoptive family would provide, they had. He seemed well-adjusted, happy, normal in all the ways I wasn't. But he also had questions. He wanted to know about Mom, what she was like, why she'd given him up. I tried to explain without making her sound like a monster, but it was hard. How do you tell someone that the mother who gave them away spent the next 20 years suffocating her second son out of guilt and fear? Rob listened without judgment, asking gentle questions about my childhood, my relationship with Mom, what it was like growing up as an only child. When I described the constant monitoring, the lack of privacy, the way she prevented me from forming relationships, his expression grew increasingly concerned. "That doesn't sound healthy," he said finally. "I mean, I get that she was probably scared after giving me up, but keeping you locked down like that, that's not fair to you." It was the first time anyone had validated what I'd been feeling my entire life. That what Mom called protection was actually control. That her love, however genuine, had become toxic. Rob showed me pictures of his daughter, a little girl with curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. He talked about wanting to give her independence as she grew up, to trust her to make mistakes and learn from them. The contrast with my own upbringing was stark. As we prepared to leave, Rob asked if I thought Mom would want to meet him. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't even considered that possibility. "I don't know," I admitted. "She's kept your existence secret for 20 years. I'm not sure she's ready to face what she gave up. But maybe she needs to," Rob said gently. "Maybe seeing that I turned out okay would help her let go of some of that guilt she's been carrying around." I drove home with my head spinning. Meeting Rob had been incredible, but it also made my situation with Mom feel even more complicated. She'd sacrificed her relationship with one son to give him a better life, then sacrificed her relationship with her second son trying to make up for the first. Everyone was paying for a decision she'd made when she was barely an adult herself. When I got home, Mom was waiting in the living room. She knew something was different. Maybe it was the way I carried myself, or maybe she could just sense that her grip on me was slipping. "Where were you really today?" she asked. For the first time in my life, I looked her straight in the eye and told her the truth. I was meeting my brother. Update 2. The explosion I expected didn't come. Instead, Mom just sat there staring at me for what felt like forever. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "You found him." It wasn't a question. She said it like she'd been waiting 20 years for this moment. "His name is Rob. He lives about 2 hours from here. He's married, has a daughter. He's been looking for you." Mom closed her eyes and pressed her hands to her face. Her shoulders started shaking, and I realized she was crying again. Is he okay? Is he happy?" I sat down across from her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than anger toward her. "He's great, Mom. His adoptive parents loved him. He had a good childhood, went to college, has a job he likes. You made the right choice." She looked up at me with red eyes. "Then why do I feel like I ruined everything?" Over the next hour, I told her about Rob, about his family, his life, his questions about her. I showed her the pictures he'd given me, his wedding photo, pictures of his daughter, a shot of him at his college graduation. She touched each photo like it was made of glass. "He looks like you did at that age," she whispered. "But happier. He wants to meet you." The words hung between us. Mom set down the photos and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. I can't face him. What would I say? How do I explain why I gave him away but kept you? How do I justify the choices I made? Maybe you don't have to justify anything. Maybe you just have to be honest about what happened and why. But I could see she wasn't ready. The idea of seeing Rob, of confronting the consequences of her decision, terrified her more than anything I'd ever seen. That's when she told me the rest of the story. "There's something else you need to know about why I gave him up." She got up and went to her bedroom, returning with a small wooden box I'd never seen before. Inside were more photos, but these were different. They showed Bobby, Rob, with bruises on his arms, a black eye, what looked like a burn mark on his shoulder. My stomach dropped. I didn't just give him up because I was poor. I gave him up because I was failing him. I was so young, so stressed, so overwhelmed. I had no support system, no one to help me when things got hard. And sometimes I lost my temper. She couldn't look at me as she continued. I never meant to hurt him. But when he wouldn't stop crying, when I hadn't slept in days, when there was no food in the house and the electricity was about to be shut off, I snapped. More than once. The room felt like it was spinning. I stared at the photos, trying to process what she was telling me. One day, I looked at him and realized he was afraid of me. This little boy who was supposed to trust me more than anyone in the world was flinching when I reached for him. That's when I knew I had to let him go. Mom. The adoption wasn't just about giving him a better life financially. It was about giving him a safe life. Away from me. Away from someone who could hurt him. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were full of pain and shame. Every day since then, I've been terrified that I'd do the same thing to you. That's why I watch you so carefully. Not just because I'm afraid of losing you, but because I'm afraid of what I might do if I get overwhelmed again. The pieces clicked into place. Her obsessive control wasn't just about preventing me from leaving. It was about preventing herself from snapping again. By keeping me close, by monitoring every aspect of my life, she was trying to eliminate any situation that might push her past her breaking point. But that meant I'd grown up walking on eggshells around my own mother, afraid to upset her, afraid to push boundaries, afraid to be a normal kid who sometimes misbehaved or made mistakes. You never hurt me, I said quietly, because I never gave myself the chance to. Because I built walls around both of us to make sure it couldn't happen. I spent the next week thinking about everything she'd told me. Part of me was horrified by what she'd done to Rob, but another part understood that she'd been a scared teenager in an impossible situation. She'd made mistakes, recognized them, and given him up to protect him. Then she'd spent the rest of her life overcompensating with me. But understanding her motivations didn't fix the damage that had been done. I was 20 years old and barely capable of functioning independently. I had no friends, no relationships, no confidence in my own judgment. Her fear of repeating her past mistakes had created new kinds of damage. Rob called me during that week. He'd been thinking about our conversation too, and he had an idea. What if we all met together? You, me, and her. Maybe it would help if she could see that I don't blame her for giving me up. Maybe it would help her forgive herself. I wasn't sure Mom was ready for that, but I agreed to ask. When I brought it up, her reaction surprised me. Instead of panic or refusal, she was quiet for a long time. Then she asked if I thought Rob would be angry with her. I think he understands that you were in an impossible situation. He's grateful for the life he had because of your decision. And you? Are you angry with me? It was a question I'd been avoiding, but I knew I had to answer honestly. I'm angry about how you raised me. I'm angry that you let your guilt about Rob control my entire life. But I'm not angry about Rob. You did what you thought was best for him. She nodded slowly. I think I'd like to meet him. But I'm scared. He's scared too. But maybe that's okay. We arranged to meet the following weekend at a park about halfway between our towns. Neutral ground, somewhere public but not too crowded. I drove Mom there, and I could tell she was nervous by the way she kept checking her appearance in the visor mirror. Rob was already there when we arrived, sitting on a bench near the playground. He stood up when he saw us walking toward him, and for a moment, nobody moved. Mom and Rob just stared at each other, taking in the reality of being in the same place after more than 20 years. Then Rob smiled, the same lopsided smile I recognized from looking in the mirror, and said, "Hi, Mom." And she broke down completely. They hugged for what felt like forever, both of them crying, both of them saying they were sorry over and over again. I stood a few feet away, watching my family reunite, and felt something I'd never experienced before. It wasn't quite happiness, but it wasn't sadness either. It was like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying suddenly lifted off my shoulders. We spent 3 hours in that park. Rob told Mom about his adoptive family, his childhood, his life now. Mom told him about the years after the adoption, about me, about the guilt and fear that had shaped everything she'd done since. I mostly listened, but occasionally I'd add details or ask questions. What struck me most was how different Mom seemed around Rob. She was still careful, still apologetic, but there was none of the frantic energy that characterized her interactions with me. Maybe it was because the worst thing she could imagine, losing a child, had already happened with him, so there was less to fear. When it was time to leave, Rob hugged both of us and said he'd like to do this again. Mom nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks, and said she'd like that too. On the drive home, Mom was quieter than I'd ever seen her. "He turned out wonderful," she said finally. "Better than I ever imagined he could. You made the right choice. But I made the wrong choice with you." I glanced over at her. She was staring out the window, but I could see her reflection. "What do you mean?" "I spent so much time trying not to repeat my mistakes with Rob that I made completely different mistakes with you. I was so afraid of hurting you that I never let you live." It was the first time she'd acknowledged what her overprotectiveness had cost me. "We can fix it," I said. "It's not too late." She looked at me with something that might have been hope. "You really think so?" Final update. That conversation in the car was the beginning of everything changing. It wasn't immediate. 20 years of patterns don't disappear overnight. But Mom started making an effort to give me space. She'd catch herself asking where I was going and instead just say, "Have a good time." She stopped reading my texts and checking my social media. She let me close my bedroom door. It was terrifying at first. I'd grown so accustomed to her constant monitoring that her sudden absence felt wrong, like something bad was about to happen. But gradually, I started to appreciate the freedom. I could have private phone conversations. I could make plans without explaining every detail. I could exist without being observed. Rob became a regular part of our lives. He'd come over for dinner once a month, bringing his wife and daughter. Watching Mom interact with her granddaughter was like seeing a completely different person. She was playful, relaxed, present in a way she'd never been with me. It was what I'd imagined normal grandparents looked like. His daughter loved having an uncle, and I loved being one. Playing with her, teaching her things, watching her explore the world with curiosity instead of fear, it showed me what childhood was supposed to look like. It made me realize how much mine had been shaped by Mom's trauma. But it also made me realize something else. As much as I resented the way I'd been raised, it had come from a place of love. Misguided, destructive love, but love nonetheless. Mom had given up her first son to protect him, then suffocated her second son trying to keep him safe. Both choices had been motivated by the same desperate desire to be a good mother. The real breakthrough came about 6 months after we'd all met. Mom and I were having dinner, just the two of us, something that used to happen every night but was now a special occasion, when she brought up something I hadn't expected. "I think you should move out." I nearly choked on my food. "What? You're 21 years old. You should have your own place, your own life. You should be making mistakes and learning from them, not sitting here letting me make all your decisions." I stared at her. This was the woman who used to panic if I was 10 minutes late coming home from school. "Are you sure? I mean, I don't have to leave if you're not ready." She smiled, and it was a sad smile but also genuine. "I'm not ready. I'll probably never be ready. But that's not a good enough reason to keep you trapped here." "I'm not trapped," I said automatically, then realized how hollow it sounded. "Yes, you are. And I'm the one who built the trap." We spent the next few weeks looking at apartments together. It was strange, having Mom help me plan my escape from her. But she seemed determined to make up for lost time, to give me the independence she'd stolen from me during my teenage years. I found a small one-bedroom place about 20 minutes away, close enough that I could visit easily, far enough that I'd have real privacy for the first time in my life. Mom helped me pick out furniture, set up utilities, stock the kitchen with basics. She cried when we finished moving my stuff in, but they seemed like good tears. Living alone was an adjustment. I had to learn how to grocery shop, how to do laundry, how to manage my own schedule. Basic life skills that most people learn gradually throughout adolescence, I had to figure out all at once. But it was exhilarating too. I could eat cereal for dinner if I wanted to. I could stay up late reading. I could have friends over without getting permission first. Making friends was the hardest part. I'd spent so many years isolated that I didn't really know how to connect with people my own age. But slowly, through school and work and just being out in the world, I started building relationships. Real ones, based on mutual interest rather than convenience or proximity. I started dating too, which was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. The first time I brought someone home to meet Mom, she was clearly struggling not to interrogate them, but she managed to keep the conversation light. Afterward, she asked if I was happy, and when I said yes, she said that was all that mattered. Rob and I grew closer too. We'd meet for lunch sometimes, just the two of us, and talk about everything and nothing. He became the brother I'd never known I needed, someone who understood the complexity of our family situation without judgment. He helped me process my anger toward Mom, reminding me that holding on to resentment would only hurt me in the long run. About a year after I moved out, Mom started seeing someone. A widower from her book club who was patient and kind and seemed to understand that she came with a lot of baggage. It was weird at first, thinking of Mom as having a romantic life, but I was happy for her. She deserved to have someone who could love her without her having to control them completely. The relationship seemed to help her relax even more. Having someone else to focus on, someone whose life didn't depend on her protection, gave her an outlet for her nurturing instincts that didn't involve smothering me or Rob. Now, 2 years later, things aren't perfect, but they're better. Mom still worries about me, still calls more often than she probably should, still has moments where she reverts to her old controlling habits. But she catches herself now, apologizes, backs off. She's working on it, which is more than I ever expected. Rob and I talk regularly. His daughter calls me uncle and asks when I'm coming to visit. I'm part of their family in ways I never was growing up, and they're part of mine. We've created something new together, built on honesty instead of secrets. I'm in a serious relationship now with someone who challenges me to keep growing, keep pushing boundaries, keep becoming the person I want to be. When I told them about my childhood, about mom's overprotectiveness and the brother I never knew existed, they listened without judgment and helped me see that my past didn't have to define my future. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never found those photos in the basement. Would Mom and I have continued our toxic dance forever? Would I have ever learned to live independently? Would Rob have ever found his birth family? But mostly I try not to dwell on what-ifs. The past happened the way it happened, and we can't change it. What we can do is learn from it, grow from it, and make better choices going forward. Mom made mistakes, serious ones that affected multiple people's lives. But she also made sacrifices, trying to do what she thought was best even when it was incredibly difficult. She gave up one son to save him, then nearly destroyed her relationship with her second son trying to make up for it. None of us are perfect. We all make decisions based on fear, on trauma, on incomplete information. The best we can do is recognize when we've made mistakes, take responsibility for them, and try to do better. My relationship with Mom will never be completely normal. Too much damage was done, too many years were lost. But it's honest now, and that's something. We can talk about difficult things. We can acknowledge past hurts without pretending they didn't happen. We can love each other without one of us having to sacrifice their autonomy. Rob's presence in our lives has been healing for all of us. He's proof that Mom's sacrifice wasn't in vain, that her decision to give him up led to good things. He's also proof that people can overcome difficult beginnings, that love can take many forms, that families can be rebuilt even after they've been broken. I'm still learning how to be independent, how to trust my own judgment, how to form healthy relationships. Some days are easier than others. But I'm learning, and that's what matters. Mom is learning too. How to love without controlling, how to worry without interfering, how to be present without being overwhelming. She's seeing a counselor now, working through decades of guilt and fear. She's trying to become the person she wishes she'd been when Rob and I needed her most.